This week's parsha, Parashat Yitro, starts with the name Yitro, but if we look back a little, that seems a little weird. Who was Yitro? Yitro was Moshe Rabbeinu's father-in-law. Moshe Rabbeinu was married to Tzipporah. Tzipporah's father was Yitro. He was worshiping idols. Until this point, he was doing all the sins he can. He wasn't even a Jew. And the Torah decided to write a parsha and name a parsha on this person. And for the reason that we're going to be learning and starting with the parsha tonight. So the parsha tonight, as we all know, we will be going to read the 10 Commandments, which is an amazing thing, and we're going to get to that soon. And receiving the Torah, standing by the Sinai mountain, the influence that we have from the strength of receiving the Torah from over 3,300 years ago and until today, that we're learning Torah right now and tomorrow and the next day for the next few hundred years, and speak about all these things Bezrat Hashem tonight. So Yitro, as we said, is Moshe's father-in-law. He actually had 7 names. And Rashi lists down these 7 names. He brings down Reuel, Yeter, Yitro, Chovav, Chever, Keni, Putiel, 7 names that this person had. And each time, the Torah uses a different name from this person, depends on what we're talking about. Beforehand, before this situation, Yitro was called Yeter. The word Yeter means more. Yoter means more. And Yitro, which the Torah starts, Vayishma Yitro, Mashmu'a Shama. What did Yitro hear? It says Yitro heard, and he came to meet Moshe, his son-in-law Moshe. He brought his daughter, which is Moshe's wife, and their 2 children, Eliezer and Gershom. But what did Yitro hear? Why suddenly did he come? And Rashi says he heard about the 2 amazing things that happened last week: the crossing, the splitting of the Red Sea, and the war against Amalek. And Yitro heard what great things Hashem, their God, is doing for them. I also want to be there. And Yitro really went. He converted. He became he did Giyur, he converted. And after that, the Torah adds a letter. From Yeter, it adds to Yitro. And the other name that is mentioned, Chovav. The word Chovav comes out of liking, lechabev et mitzvah, to like the mitzvot. One of the names of Yitro was Chovav, because Rashi says that he liked doing the mitzvot. After he converted, after he connected so well to Hashem, to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Am Yisrael, he liked so much of doing the mitzvot. So that was another name that was mentioned for Yitro, which was Chovav, to like the Torah. And Yitro was living with Moshe Rabbeinu, with Am Yisrael. Everything was nice and well. And he sees that Moshe Rabbeinu is doing something, but not so smart. Now, Moshe Rabbeinu is the leader. He's been the leader for Am Yisrael for hundreds of years, since he was born in Egypt and led them out from Egypt, crossing the Red Sea. But he sees that Moshe Rabbeinu is doing something not so correctly, or maybe it can be done better. And what is that? Am Yisrael had questions. Am Yisrael had questions what to do about Hashem, mitzvot. They didn't get the Torah yet, so they didn't have a Torah, but they had a lot of questions. They got 3 mitzvot in last week's parsha, actually, where they sat in a place called Mara. After they crossed the Red Sea, they got to a place called Mara, and they had a problem. All the water there was mar, was bitter, and that's why the place was called Mara. And they called upon Moshe and say, Moshe, we have nothing to drink. We could have died in Egypt and be buried properly in Egypt, and now we're going to die from thirst in the desert. Moshe calls up to Hashem, and what does Hashem do? Hashem sends down a tree from the heavens, and the water became sweet. And in that place, Am Israel, they were given 3 mitzvot. One of them was Shabbat. Another one was Para Aduma, the red cow, which is going to pure Am Israel when we find the red cow and when Mashiach comes. And the third one was Mishpatim, judgment. And Moshe Rabbeinu in our parsha, the Torah says that he was judging Am Israel from morning all the way to the night, all day. And there's been a long, long line waiting to come to Moshe to ask him the questions. Think about the biggest rabbi or the biggest prophet. Moshe Rabbeinu was the biggest rabbi, and he was the prophet. He was the leader of all of Am Israel. Right today, at least in Israel, right, they're having the elections. And there are a lot of different parties. You have the right wing, the left wing, the middle. You have some people that connect, some people that disconnect. In those days, there wasn't anything like that. Moshe Rabbeinu was the party of the elections. He was the only vote you could have given. There were no other parties. Everybody came to Moshe lehavdil. Everybody came to Moshe to ask him questions, and it became a long line. Yitro comes to Moshe and says, Moshe, what are you doing? You're having the people wait for you. They're going to let go. They're not going to want to wait. They're not going to have patience. So I have an advice for you. Look for people and have them and teach them how to judge Am Israel. Teach them the laws they need to know quickly and what they need to know. All the easy questions will refer to them, and all the harder questions, the more difficult questions that have difficult cases, can be referred to you. And that way, everybody will win. You will have a shorter line, and Am Israel will wait shorter. And the Torah says that Moshe chose 4 different categories that need to find these people. Moshe Rabbeinu looked for Anshei Chayil, Anshei Emet, and Son'ei Vatza. 3 categories. And these people, what does these people mean? Anshei Chayil, that means rich people. Why does Moshe Rabbeinu need rich people to judge the people? Very simple. Because if someone comes to a judgment and that person that's coming to ask a question says, I have a lot of money. How about he bribes him? How about I give you 100 rand here or 500 rand here? I don't know if there was rand in those days or shekels in those days, whatever it is. And you'll judge me for a goodwill or on the right side. And if he chooses rich people, they don't need the money. The next category is Anshei Emet, of course, speaking the truth. Obviously, judges need to speak the truth, even though if it's not comfortable for them, even though if they can't even say think differently, because then they're not saying the truth. They need to be correct with the way that Moshe Rabbeinu and Hashem, and that we'll see that the Torah gives us and leads us the way. And the third category is Son'ei Batza. The first one was to be rich. The third one is to hate their money. They have money, but they're not always looking around the money, because we know, as David HaMelech tells us in Tehillim, Tov li Torat picha me'alfei zahav b'chesef. The Torah is much better, is worth much more than thousands of money, than thousands of gold. Tov li Torat picha me'alfei zahav b'chesef. So also these people, the Torah needs to be more important on a higher level than their money. And those are the people that Moshe Rabbeinu looked for, chose upon, and brought thousands and thousands of those people to judge all the 100,000s of Am Israel that were waiting to ask questions. And Moshe Rabbeinu took the advice of Yitro, he made it happen, and that came out well. And all of this happened in a place called Refidim. Vayis'u miRefidim vayavo midbar Sinai. And here we're coming to the most exciting historical event that happened to Am Israel. There was no such event beforehand and no such event afterhand where Hashem himself was seen upon of all of Am Israel together, nothing beforehand and nothing afterhand. And the event, of course, is the event of Sinai Mountain, and we'll go a little into what happened there on when Am Yisrael was standing there, receiving the Torah, the 10 Commandments, and the influence that we have from it. The Torah says, בחודש השלישי, לצאת בני ישראל מארץ מצרים, the third month of Am Yisrael coming out of Egypt. The first month is Nisan, that they came out on Tetvav Nisan. Then we have Iyar, and then we have Sivan. So it's about a month and 3 weeks since Am Yisrael left Egypt. They come to a month and a half since they left Egypt. They come to Sinai Mountain, and Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Har. They came to Har Sinai as and they settled there as one person. The Torah says Vayichan, not Vayachanu. The word Vayachanu is plural, that Am Yisrael all together settled by Har Sinai. But the Torah says Vayichan, and Rashi explains Keish echad belev echad. Just as like one person in one heart, that is how they settled on Har Sinai. And they got to Har Sinai on Rosh Chodesh Sivan, and we learned that from one of the rules of a Gzera Shava, which we learned from one word to another word in a different place of the Torah. We won't go into that right now. And they start getting ready, preparing for receiving the Torah. The first day they get there, everything is well. The second day, Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to Hashem, and Hashem tells him everything that Am Yisrael needs to know in order to prepare themselves to receive the Torah in just a few days. On the third day, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down, and one of the things that Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu to tell Am Yisrael is "Ve'atem tiyuli mamlechet kohanim ve'goy kadosh." Am Yisrael is now appointed as the Kohanim, just like the Kohanim worked in Bet HaMikdash. Am Yisrael was appointed the same job, just around the world. What does that mean? The Kohanim in Bet HaMikdash, they were the string of the connection between Am Yisrael on the bottom and the Shekhinah and Hashem from the top. Without the Kohanim, we can't sacrifice our sacrifices. We can't get into Bet HaMikdash because only pure Kohanim can get into Bet HaMikdash. The Kohanim there were the connection. Hashem points Am Yisrael to be the connection between Hashem and this world. The Atem Tiuli Mamlechet Kohanim, the kingdom of the Kohanim in Bet HaMikdash in this world. And be holy people. Why? Because I am holy. Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadosh ani. Just like Hashem is holy, same idea, Am Yisrael is holy, and we'll see how we get connected to that. When Am Yisrael come and hear these things from Moshe, Moshe also tells them, now it's start preparation to Har Sinai, the 4th and 5th, and then the 6th day, which they will receive the Torah. You need to be by yourselves, no having any matters, no doing anything wrong. Just prepare for the amazing holiness that you will be going to see in just a few days. And the holiness is mentioned several times in the Torah, but it's not mentioned as one of the mitzvot in the Torah. So we need to be holy. Because Hashem says, Kedoshim tihiyu ki kadoshani, because Hashem is holy. And we were chosen as that nation. Same idea, there's no mitzvah in the Torah to be a Jew. There isn't a mitzvah in the Torah to be a Jew. Because when we are born, we are Jews automatically. When we are born, we are holy automatically because Hashem chose Am Yisrael to be the chosen nation on Har Sinai. As the Midrash says, that a famous Midrash says that Hashem went to a lot of nations and offered them the Torah. And every nation asked, what is written in the Torah? And Hashem answered this and this. And they said, no, went to a different nation, same idea, same story, goes to all the nations, then comes to Am Yisrael. And what do they say? Na'aseh v'nishma. Yes, we will do whatever is written in the Torah. What's written in the Torah? That doesn't matter right now. Because we want to be connected to the Holy One. We want to be connected to the King of the Kings, the King of the universe, to Hashem. And the only way to do it is to take a step back and say, yes, we want to receive the Torah. And as we said, there's no mitzvah of being holy. There's no mitzvah of being a Jew. Everybody is born at the same line. Now, when we are born, each one is in charge for himself. Does he want to be a better Jew, to do mitzvot, to connect to Hashem, to be more holy? Excellent. That's the free will. That is the amazing thing that Hashem gave the person, a free will. You want to be holy? Excellent. You have the Torah, you have the mitzvot, you have the brachot, you have everything. And a person could choose, I will be holy, I will be Jewish, but stay at the same level. And when Am Yisrael was at Har Sinai, they said, Naaseh v'nishma. We want to be the nation, the chosen nation of Hashem. And when Hashem comes to give them the Torah, it says in our parasha, ויוצא משה את העם לקראת האלוהים מן המחנה. When Moshe came down and he was preparing Am Yisrael, it says ויתייצבו בתחתית האף. They settled on the bottom of the mountain. And what does that mean? Rashi says, and as the Talmud in Masechet Shabbat says, שנתלה שהר ממקומו ונכפה עליהם הר כגיגית. And Hashem says, what does that mean? Hashem says, when they settle on the bottom, you can take a bucket, think of a bucket. You can take a bucket and flip it over and cover what's ever under it. Same idea over here. Hashem picked up this mountain of Har Sinai, flipped it over Am Yisrael, and he says, if you receive the Torah, excellent. If not, po teheh kvuratchem. This is going to be your burial site. Now, this is weird. Just a minute ago, we were talking about free will. If Hashem is saying, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to flip the mountain on top of you, and here's going to be your burial site, there's no free will. It's two choices, either living or not living. And the explanation is like this. When Am Yisrael said Naaseh v'nishma beforehand, they were talking about Torah shebichtav. We have two types of the Torah. We have Torah shebichtav, that's what we read in Shul on a Shabbat and a Monday and a Thursday, and we take out. That is the written Torah that we have in front of us. But not less important, or without the second part, there is no way, zero chances to know and understand what's in the first part. And what's the second part? Torah shebe'al peh, the oral Torah, that Hashem taught Moshe Rabbeinu in the 40 days and 40 nights that Moshe Rabbeinu went up to Hashem after he brought down the 10 commandments, and he learned from Hashem. Everything that we learn today, everything that was written in the past, everything that will be learned in the future, Moshe Rabbeinu already learned it from Hashem. That's called Torah shebe'al peh. The Torah shebichtav cannot be less, cannot be more, cannot be added. The Torah shebe'al peh, the oral Torah, is given to each and every one of us, of our sages, of us, our children, the next generation. And Hashem taught everything to Moshe. So what is this? The mountain flipping over itself and warning Am Yisrael? The Torah shebichtav, Am Yisrael said Naaseh v'nishma. We will receive the Torah and then we will hear what's written in it. And then Hashem tells also the Torah shebe'al peh. So Am Yisrael, they had no chance. They say, okay, we'll also receive the Torah shebe'al peh, the oral Torah. We have no other chance. If not, we're going to die here. And this connects also to Purim. In Purim, we say, Hadur kibluha bimei Achashverosh. In Aramaic, the word Hadur means came back or second time. Hadur kibluha, they came back, Am Yisrael, at the time of Achashverosh. Thousands of years later, after the Sinai mountain, they came back and they took upon themselves the oral Torah with their will, with no one warning with them, with no one flipping a mountain above them. So what do we have here? The Torah shebichtav, Am Yisrael said Naaseh v'nishma. And then the Midrash says that Hashem wanted to flip the mountain over them. If you receive the Torah, then excellent. And which Torah is he referring to? Torah Shebe'al Peh. And that's how we connected it to Purim that we're going to have here. So that's why also Purim, when we get closer to Purim, maybe B'ezrat Hashem we can do a shiur on this. Purim is just like Matan Torah. It's just like Shavuot. Because one without the other, A without B and B without A, you have nothing. You have something, but you can't understand it. Definitely the oral Torah without the written Torah you can't have. And to understand the written Torah without the oral Torah, it's impossible. And we could give even one example. It says in Kriyat Shema that we need to read, say Shema Yisrael. It says in the Torah, Uveshochbecha uvkumecha. When you go to sleep, and when you wake up. In the Talmud and Masechet Brachot, there are several pages that deal with this question. What is Uveshochbecha uvkumecha? What does that mean? Is it nighttime, the whole time that you go to sleep, which is nighttime, that is when we read the Kriyat Shema, and the daytime when you wake up, the whole day? Or maybe it refers usually the time that people go to sleep. At the beginning of the night, that's the correct time to read Kriyat Shema, and the time that people wake up, not the whole day that people are awake, the time that people wake up. Or maybe it refers how our body needs to sit. How do we go to sleep? By lying down. Maybe I need to read Kriyat Shema at night, specifically when I lie down, and if I sit down, I'm not doing anything because it says Uveshochbecha when you lie down. And same idea with the day. Uvkumecha, when you stand up, because you're standing up in the morning. Maybe I need to read Kriyat Shema during the day. And this is just one example from thousands and thousands of examples that we have so much Torah Shebe'al Peh, oral Torah around us to understand what the Torah gives us. Yes, there are a lot of arguments. Yes, there are a lot of debates. Yes, there are a lot of changes in the history and in our days, just like electricity. How to refer with electricity and Shabbat. And Har Sinai, trust me, and we all know there was no electricity. 1,000 years ago, no electricity, right? A few hundred years ago, no phones. How do we refer electricity, a microwave, a blech, a fluorescent to Shabbat? Are we allowed to turn it on? Not allowed to turn it on? What is the sin? What is not the sin? Is it from the sages? Is it from the Torah? All these questions, maybe if not specifically written in the Talmud or in the oral Torah that we have, but can be learned. Everything is written in the Torah, from when it was received until the last day of the world. We just need to look for it and find it. And that was a little about the Har Sinai. And another midrash that says, I hope you're all getting ready for Pesach, because we're going to be in Pesach in just less than 2 months. We're going to say in the Haggadah of Leil HaSeder, in the song Dayenu, Ilu kirvanu lifnei Har Sinai, velo natan lanu et haTorah dayenu. If Hashem brought Am Israel to the Sinai mountain, but did not give us the Torah, dayenu, that would be enough. And it's a very hard sentence. That also on that sentence, we can speak a lot, maybe closer to Pesach. If we got to Har Sinai, then give us the Torah. And if you didn't give us the Torah, what's enough just standing next to a mountain? And the Midrash says, the Talmud says, that when Am Israel came upon Har Sinai, just then, as we said, Kedoshim to you, they became holy. Na'aseh v'nishma, we will receive the Torah. And when they came to Har Sinai, all the impurity has stopped from them. All the impurity from Egypt, from the creation of the world, from the first man, from Adam, which he was the first one to go over a sin and eat from the tree of knowledge, all the way from then has a connection at Har Sinai, not receiving the Torah beforehand. At Har Sinai, all of this ended. That is the amazing of Har Sinai. And getting to the 10 Commandments, it says, "Vaydaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'ele lemor." Now Hashem has several names. He actually has 7 different names. We have them all in the Torah, we have them in the Brachot, and depends on what we're talking about and what we're saying, that name is used. And over here, the name Elohim, God, is used. And the word Elohim refers to judgment, to a little harsh. And this comes to tell us that we have mitzvot in the Torah. And if a person does that mitzvah, he gets earned with goodwill by doing the mitzvah. And if he did not do the mitzvah, then he doesn't get a punishment. Depends on the mitzvah, but he doesn't get a punishment. Over here, the Aseret HaDibrot start with Elohim to teach us that over here it's a little harsh than others. And what is harsh? If you do the 10 commandments, you will get earned. But if you don't do the 10 commandments, then you will get punished. It's not that you won't get anything. Over here, that's what the word Elohim, Vaydaber Elohim et kol hadvarim ha'ele, the judgment, to be harsh, that we need to listen. And going through the 10 commandments really quickly, even though on each one and one we could give a shiur of a half an hour, and sit down here for another 10 hours because we have 10 commandments, but we're not going to do that. That's why this is just an introduction, and it's good to go over the Torah with explanations, as we saw the oral Torah. Just reading the regular psukim is important, but to understand the meaning behind it is not less important and needs to be used. So we have the 10 commandments, which starts Anochi Adonai Elohecha asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mibet avadim. The first one is Anochi. I, Hashem, is talking to Am Yisrael. Hashem himself, with Hashem's voice, is talking to Am Yisrael. Because the first two commandments are saying by Hashem. And we can see that from the words in Hebrew that he's talking from himself. From number 3 to number 10, Moshe Rabbeinu was the one that's saying it, and he's saying it to a third person, Lo Yelecha, that we shouldn't have to Hashem. But in the first two ones, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Hashem is talking about himself. Asher hotzeticha me'eretz Mitzrayim bet avadim. You have, the first commandment is to have faith in Hashem, to believe that Hashem has taken Am Yisrael out of Egypt, just like we tell the story every Leil Seder, and all year long, every single day we read it twice in Parashat, in Kriyat Shema, and the third parasha is also in the morning and in the evening. The second commandment that Hashem himself also says, Lo yelecha Elohim acherim al panai, you shouldn't have another God except for me, no worshiping, of course. Going to the third, Lo tisa et shem Hashem Elokecha lashav. Not allowed to swear about different things that you can't do. For example, a person, also physically and also halachically. For example, a person cannot swear that he won't sleep at all for 3 days, because it's impossible for a person to stay up for 3 days, except for Moshe Rabbeinu, which was a prophet, that he went up and did not eat and did not drink and did not sleep for 40 days and 40 nights, the first time to learn the Torah. And the second law that we learn from Lo Tisa is that we're not allowed to say Hashem's name with no reason. So we learned beforehand that we have 7 names for Hashem. But if we're not saying a bracha, if we're not davening, if we're not reading the Torah, just saying random words, there is a sin in the Torah, in the 10 commandments, not to say Hashem's name for no reason. Going to the fourth one, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat lekadesho. And in Sefer Dvarim, if you all remember in Parashat Va'etchanan, we have the 10 commandments the second time. And there are several differences. We can't go into the differences because also that we can speak about hours of the differences between the first commandment and the second commandments. But one of the amazing things is that what a person cannot do is to say 2 different words simultaneously at the same time. And the Torah says, and the Rashi says, Zachor et Yom HaShabbat, and in Sefer Dvarim, we have Shamor et Yom HaShabbat. Zachor ve'shamor bedibur echad ne'emru. Moshe Rabbeinu, we're not even talking about Hashem now. Moshe Rabbeinu said the words Zachor v'Shamor the same time, simultaneously at the same second. And Am Yisrael heard two different words. Another amazing thing that happened there of Zachor et Yom HaShabbat. And what is Zachor et Yom HaShabbat? To remember the Shabbat. And how do we remember the Shabbat? By words, by doing Kiddush, by doing the mitzvot that we need to do on Shabbat. And on the other side, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat is to watch over the Shabbat. And here we get to another example, great example of the oral Torah. Okay, so I tell you, Shamor et Yom HaShabbat. What is Shamor? Lishmor, to watch over. Now I'll ask you, how do you watch over Shabbat? If I write Shabbat on my hand, the word Shabbat, and I close my hand, I'm watching over Shabbat. Am I now keeping Shabbat? If I write Shabbat on my door and I put a guard near my door, he's watching over Shabbat. How do we watch over Shabbat? There is no other way to learn and understand the word of Zachor et Yom HaShabbat and Shamor et Yom HaShabbat without the oral Torah. So Zachor is by doing mitzvot aseh, by saying Kiddush, by eating on Shabbat, by learning Torah on Shabbat and keeping Shabbat, that is Zachor. Shamor et Yom HaShabbat is the mitzvot lo ta'aseh, the things that we watch over that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat, that is Shamor et Yom HaShabbat. Going on to the next commandment, Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, respect our parents, and a nice difference that we can see between here and our next week's parsha. We have one time that it says, Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, we need to respect our father and our mother. But in a different place it says, Ish imo ve'aviv tirau. A person needs to have fear from his mother and his father. Now, okay, very good. What's the difference? Very big difference. In our parasha, what comes first? The father or the mother? Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Respect your father and your mother. When we're talking about fear, it mentions the mother between the father. So you'll say to yourself, what's the difference? Father, mother, mother, father, here's first, there's second. What's the difference? Every single word and letter in the Torah has a difference and gives us a meaning. The meaning over here, Kabed et avicha ve'et imecha, why do we need respect? We'll start with the irah. That a person has to have fear from his mother and his father, because usually a person has fear from his father more than his mother. Maybe because his father is more harsh, maybe more scary. And that's why the Torah first refers to the mother. Because maybe a person can think, oh, my mother, she's not so scary. I don't need to have fear from her. And that's why the Torah mentions the mother first with to have fear. But respecting, a person can maybe connect more to his mother because his mother hugs him more, the mother loves him more, the mother is more attached, the mother's home maybe the majority of the time more than the father. And that's why the Torah comes to tell us, Kabed et avicha. Have respect to your father, not less than your mother. That's just a nice and small difference between the ways that the Torah knows how to think and how to measurize the words that it has. Going on to the next commandment, lo tirtzach, not to kill, lo tinaf, not commit adultery, lo tignov, not to steal in bedinei mamonot. It's not talking about stealing humans, but stealing regular properties. Lo ta'aneh v'reacha ed shaker, be false witness against your fellow. And the last one, lo tachmod, not to covet your fellow's house or wife or anything that belongs to them. Not to think, oh, wow, what a wonderful car that person has, my neighbor has. I wish I would have the same thing. No, look at your belongings. Say thank you to Hashem for what you have. If you see something that you like, then you can say, oh, maybe we'll find it in the store and we'll buy something like what he has, an example of what he has. But to say, I want what he has in his house, that is lo tachmud. And that's where Hashem, and that's where the 10 commandments finish. And getting to the end of the shiur, v'chol ha'am roim et hakolot, all of Am Yisrael are seeing the noises. Ve'et halapidim ve'et har ashen, seeing all the smoke and the lightning and the thunder, seeing the thunder on Har Sinai. What we can see today, Hashem opened up the 7 heavens on Har Sinai, and Am Yisrael saw En Od Milvado. There's no one else in this world except for Hashem. And that's what Am Yisrael saw in that moment of the Sinai mountain. And taking these things, this parasha, the parasha of the 10 Commandments, one of the amazing sources of Am Yisrael and the influence that we have from 3,300 years ago to today, that every day that we learn Torah, we need to think today we received the Torah, not 3,000 years ago. Every single day we receive the Torah, and we'll end just with the bracha of the Torah that we have every morning, that we say every morning. We say one of the brachot in the morning is Asher Kiddeshanu v'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Doesn't say lilmod b'divrei Torah, not to learn Torah. Learning Torah is very important, but to deal with the Torah. The Torah needs to be connected. We are Mamlechet Kohanim. We are the kingdom of the Kohanim. We are here to show all the other nations what is holiness. What does holiness mean? What is connection to the God means? What is the connection to the creator of the world, the King of Kings mean? We are here as a light for the other nations. And that's why we need to make sure we do 2 things. One of them is to stay connected to Hashem by learning Torah, by davening, by saying brachot, by coming to shul, by taking time every single day, even for just a few minutes, if a person has to learn Torah. Because every second that a person learns Torah, he also holds up the whole world, because with no Torah, the world will just not be. And he also makes a more connection of holiness between himself and Hashem. And the second thing is to live a life of Torah, not to learn Torah and leave it outside my life. Okay, I'm reading a book. To bring it inside to our homes, to bring it inside to our lives, to bring it inside to our hearts and our mind. And to end with the halacha about Shabbat, even though we spoke about a lot of laws on this Shabbat, we have the 10 Commandments, and we have beforehand and afterhand, the end of the parasha, we also have a law. But to end with a law about Shabbat, we have laning on Shabbat. Kriyat Torah, we all know, and this was brought down from Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu gave us one of the laws to lane in the Torah in shul on Shabbat morning, on Monday, and on Thursday. Ezra HaSofer later on also brought down on Mincha and Shabbat. But Moshe Rabbeinu gave us the law of to lane on the Torah on Shabbat morning, Monday, and Thursday. One of the reasons is so we won't have more than 3 days without the Torah. Between Shabbat and Monday, there are not 3 days. Between Monday and Thursday, we don't have 3 full days. And same idea between Thursday and Friday. And the law is that, and one of the halachot are that we call up 7 people on to the Torah on Shabbat. And the meaning of the Torah is not preferably to learn the Torah in this laning. Why not? Here we're learning the Torah. We don't need to go to shul. A person doesn't need to go to shul to learn Torah. A person needs to go to shul to daven, to go to a minyan, and if there's no shul and can't go to shul, to daven at home. But the laning itself is not preferably to learn Torah. The laning itself in shul is to give us the moment of receiving the Torah, to go back 3,300 years ago and try feeling what Am Yisrael felt then by receiving the Torah. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu wanted to teach us. Not to forget about what happened years, thousands of years ago to our sages, but to have it every single week, a few times a week. Try feeling what happened in Har Sinai to yourself, to your own shul, to your own community, to Am Yisrael altogether. And that's why we have the laning on Shabbat, to try feeling the Kabbalat Torah, receiving the Torah that happened thousands of years ago, but to try feeling it, that's happening every day, that when we learn Torah and we try feeling the Torah, then we stay connected and be holy to Hashem on a higher level, going forward and forward generation after generation, and Bezrat Hashem, until we receive, we get Mashiach ben David, and the temple Bet HaMikdash will be rebuilt Bezrat Hashem very soon.